The ache was a familiar tenant in Alara's chest. It had signed a long-term lease 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago, and it had never once been late with its rent of quiet, persistent pain. It lived in the hollow of her throat when Maya laughed at something Alara said, and it curled up in the pit of her stomach when Maya's head found its familiar place on her shoulder during their movie nights. Tonight, the ache was particularly active, a low thrumming that vibrated behind her ribs, keeping time with the frantic, useless beating of her own heart. Maya was talking about Liam again. It's like he hears the words, Alara, but he doesn't listen to the music behind them, Maya said, her voice a soft, frustrated sigh that fogged the air between them. They were on the couch, tucked into the worn gray cushions that had become the geography of their friendship. A half-empty bottle of red wine sat on the coffee table, a silent witness to this recurring ritual. I tell him I had a hard day and he offers solutions. You should have done this, or next time, you should try that. He doesn't understand that I don't need a consultant. I just need a hand to hold. A knife, sharp and cold, turned in Alara's gut. I would hold your hand, she thought, the words so loud in her mind that she feared they had escaped her lips. I would hold your hand and trace patterns on your palm until your day melted away. I would listen to the music and the silence and everything in between. But she said none of that. Instead, she performed her role, the one she had perfected over 2 years of agonizing practice. She was the supportive best friend, the steady, unwavering confidant. She was the keeper of Maya's heart, but only in the way a museum curator keeps a priceless artifact behind thick glass, admired but never ever touched. He's a man, May, Alara said, her voice carefully calibrated to be gentle, understanding. She shifted slightly, allowing Maya to lean more heavily against her. The contact was a wildfire on her skin, a scorching heat that she had learned to endure. They're problem solvers. It's how they're wired. It's not that he doesn't care, he just shows it differently. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She had become an expert translator for a language she did not believe in, an apologist for an emotional illiteracy that was slowly draining the light from Maya's eyes. Every time she defended Liam, she felt like a traitor to her own heart, and worse, a traitor to Maya's happiness. Maya sighed again, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of all her unspoken disappointments. She nuzzled her head deeper into the crook of Alara's neck, and Alara had to physically stop herself from inhaling the scent of vanilla and lavender that was so uniquely Maya. To breathe it in too deeply felt like a transgression, a theft of an intimacy she was not owed. I know, Maya murmured against her shoulder. I know you're right. It's just exhausting. It's exhausting trying to teach someone how to love you. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with all the things Alara couldn't say. It was filled with the memory of 1,000 small moments, Maya bringing her soup when she was sick, the way she remembered Alara's coffee order down to the half pump of caramel, the time she'd stayed up all night helping Alara study for a final. Her presence a quiet, solid anchor in a sea of anxiety. Maya knew how to love. She loved so fiercely, so completely. She was just giving that love to the wrong person, a person who couldn't appreciate its texture, its depth. Alara's world was a universe with 2 suns, the one that rose in the sky every morning, and the one that was currently resting against her, her soft breaths warming Alara's skin. For 2 years, she had orbited this girl, her entire existence dictated by the gravitational pull of Maya's presence. She structured her days around Maya's schedule, learned to love Maya's favorite bands, adopted Maya's slang. She had reshaped her own life to fit perfectly into the negative space of Maya's, filling in the gaps, becoming the essential, invisible support system. She was the foundation, but Liam was the house everyone saw. Maybe you just need to be more direct, Alara suggested, the advice feeling hollow and pointless even as she offered it. Tell him exactly what you need in those moments. Liam, I don't need advice right now. I just need you to listen. I've tried, Maya said, her voice small. It works for a day, maybe 2. And then we're right back where we started. It feels like I'm holding up a set of instructions, and he's reading them in a different language. She pulled away then, just enough to look at Alara, and the full force of her gaze was a physical blow. Maya's eyes were the color of warm honey, flecked with green and gold, and when they were clouded with sadness like this, Elara felt an almost primal urge to fix it, to do anything to bring back their usual sparkle. Is it supposed to be this hard, Elle? Is love supposed to feel like a constant, uphill battle? The question hung in the air, a fragile, shimmering thing. It was a real question, a vulnerable one. It was a plea. And Elara, the keeper of her own agonizing secret, had to answer it. No, her heart screamed. It should be as easy as breathing. It should feel like coming home. It should feel the way I feel when I'm with you. No, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It shouldn't be. She held her breath, waiting for the follow-up question, the one she always dreaded. Then what should it feel like? But Maya just nodded slowly, a deep, weary acceptance settling over her features. She looked down at her own hands, twisting them in her lap. The silence stretched, and Elara watched her, cataloging the gentle slope of her nose, the way a stray piece of dark hair curled behind her ear, the faint, almost invisible scar above her eyebrow from a childhood fall. Elara knew these details better than she knew her own reflection. They were the scriptures of her silent religion. Living with Maya was a unique form of exquisite torture. Their shared two-bedroom apartment was a sanctuary and a prison. Every morning, Elara would wake up to the sound of Maya humming in the kitchen as she made coffee, the scent wafting into her room. They would share breakfast, their knees brushing under the small table, a casual contact that sent jolts of electricity through Elara's entire body. They would go about their days, and then, in the evening, they would reconvene on this very couch, falling back into their easy, comfortable rhythm. It was a perfect domesticity, a beautiful mirage of the life Elara desperately wanted. But always, there was the shadow of Liam, a constant reminder that this life wasn't hers. He would pick Maya up for dates, his hand possessively on the small of her back, and Elara would have to smile and wave from the doorway, her heart splintering into 1,000 tiny pieces. She was a ghost in her own love story, haunting the background, an unseen presence whose only role was to support the main characters. The irony was suffocating. She, who understood Maya's heart better than anyone, was the one person who could never claim it. To confess her feelings would be to detonate a bomb in the center of their world. The friendship, this precious, life-sustaining thing, would be obliterated in the blast. And the risk of losing Maya entirely was a risk she was not brave enough to take. So she remained silent, letting the unsaid words build up inside her until she felt like she was filled with poison. "I'm tired," Maya finally said, breaking the quiet. She stood up and stretched, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the lamp beside the couch. "I think I'm just going to go to bed." "Okay," Elara said, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the still room. She stayed seated, watching as Maya walked towards her bedroom. At the doorway, Maya paused. She turned back, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Thanks for listening, Elle. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Always," Elara replied, the word a vow. It was the truest thing she had ever said. And then Maya was gone, her bedroom door clicking softly shut, leaving Elara alone with the wine, the silence, and the familiar, aching weight in her chest. She stared at the closed door, the white painted wood a stark, impassable barrier. On the other side was the center of her universe, and she was stuck out here, in the cold, empty darkness of space. The stasis was unbearable, a holding pattern with no end in sight. But for now, it was all she had. It was this, or it was nothing. And she would always, always choose this. The shift came on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, gray and drizzling, the kind of day that promised nothing and usually delivered on that promise. Elara was working from home, huddled over her laptop at the kitchen table, when her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Can you talk?" Elara's heart did a familiar, nervous flutter. A text like that usually preceded a phone call detailing another minor skirmish with Liam. She typed back a quick "of course" and waited. But the call didn't come. Instead, 10 minutes later, she heard a key fumbling in the lock of their apartment door. It was too early for Maya to be home from work. The door opened and Maya stumbled in, looking like she had been caught in a hurricane. Her hair was soaked and plastered to her cheeks, her mascara was smudged in dark tracks down her face, and her shoulders were shaking with silent, racking sobs. She wasn't holding a purse or her work bag. She was just there. A raw, open wound in their doorway. Maya? Ilara was on her feet instantly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She rushed to her side, her own panic rising like bile in her throat. What happened? Are you okay? Maya just shook her head, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. She didn't say a word. She just collapsed into Ilara's arms, her body heavy and boneless, and sobbed. It wasn't the quiet, frustrated crying Ilara was used to. This was a storm, a primal, guttural sound of a heart breaking. Ilara wrapped her arms around her, holding her tightly, her own shirt quickly becoming soaked with Maya's tears. She guided them towards the couch, a slow, stumbling procession, and sank down into the cushions, pulling Maya down with her. For a long time, there were no words. There was only the sound of Maya's grief and the steady, reassuring circles Ilara was rubbing on her back. Ilara's mind raced, trying to piece together what could have happened. It had to be Liam. It had to be the final, catastrophic fight that had been brewing for months. Part of her, a selfish, hopeful part she quickly squashed, felt a flicker of something that wasn't entirely sympathy. But mostly, she just felt Maya's pain as if it were her own. Seeing her like this was like watching the sun fall out of the sky. Eventually, the storm of sobs subsided into shuddering breaths and quiet hiccups. Maya pulled back slightly, her face tear-stained and blotchy. She wouldn't meet Ilara's eyes. "It's over," she whispered, her voice raw. "Liam and I. It's really over." Ilara's heart gave a complicated lurch, a mixture of relief and dread. This was the moment she had, in the darkest corners of her mind, wished for. But seeing the reality of it, the devastation it had caused Maya, was nothing like she had imagined. There was no triumph, only a deep, shared sorrow. "What happened?" Ilara asked softly, tucking a wet strand of hair behind Maya's ear. Her fingers brushed against Maya's cold skin, and a jolt went through her. "The same fight," Maya said, her voice thick. "The same stupid, endless fight about him not listening, not being present. But this time he said something. He said maybe the problem wasn't him. Maybe the problem was that I was looking for something he could never give me. That I was holding him to a standard that didn't exist." She let out a humorless, watery laugh. "He said I was emotionally demanding." Rage, hot and fierce, surged through Ilara. "He's an idiot." "He's not wrong," Maya whispered, and that was what truly broke Ilara's heart. "Maybe I am. Maybe I want too much." "No," Ilara said, her voice firm, insistent. She cupped Maya's face in her hands, forcing her to look up. "You are not too much, you are the perfect amount. Wanting to be seen and heard is not demanding, Maya. It's the bare minimum. It's the entire point." Maya's lower lip trembled, and she stared at Ilara, her honey-colored eyes searching for something. Ilara held her gaze, pouring every ounce of sincerity and love she possessed into that single look. She willed Maya to see it, to understand it, to believe it. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls around her own heart felt thin, almost translucent. They stayed like that for a long moment, the world shrinking to the few inches of space between their faces. Ilara could feel Maya's breath on her skin, could count the individual, wet eyelashes that framed her swollen eyes. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, something different from the familiar angst of their late-night talks. It was fragile and terrifying and utterly new. Finally, Maya pulled away, wrapping her arms around her own waist as if to hold herself together. She stared at the blank television screen, her reflection a ghostly, shattered version of herself. The apartment was quiet for a long time. The only sounds were the gentle patter of rain against the window and their soft, uneven breaths. Ilara didn't push. She just sat beside her, a solid, unwavering presence. She would wait out the silence for as long as it took. She would wait forever. When Maya finally spoke again, her voice was so quiet Ilara had to strain to hear it. "Can I ask you something stupid?" "There are no stupid questions," Ilara said immediately. Maya hesitated, worrying her bottom lip between her teeth. Can I sleep in your bed tonight? My room, it just feels so full of him. His clothes are still in the closet, his stupid book is on the nightstand. I can't. I don't think I can be in there. And I really, really don't want to be alone. The request landed in the center of Alara's chest like a physical weight, knocking the air from her lungs. It was a perfectly logical, innocent request born of grief and the need for comfort. It was a testament to the safety and security of their friendship. And for Alara, it was the most terrifying and exhilarating proposition she had ever heard. Her bed. Her space. The place where she lay awake at night, thinking of Maya. The idea of Maya being there, just inches away, breathing the same air and the intimate darkness, was a fantasy so potent she had barely allowed herself to imagine it. Now it was being offered to her, casually, as a simple act of friendship. Her mind screamed 1,000 warnings. This is dangerous. This is crossing a line. You will not survive this. But her heart, that foolish, hopeful traitor, whispered something else entirely. Say yes. Of course, Alara heard herself say, her voice sounding impossibly calm. Of course you can. The world tilted on its axis. The familiar landscape of their friendship had just developed a fault line, a deep, shuddering crack, and Alara had no idea what lay on the other side. All she knew was that they were about to cross it, together. And she was utterly, completely terrified. That night, the air in Alara's bedroom was thick with a strange, humming energy. She had given Maya a spare t-shirt and a pair of sleep shorts, and had tried to act casual as they both brushed their teeth in the shared bathroom, their elbows bumping at the sink. Every mundane action felt charged, freighted with a significance that made Alara's hands tremble. She was acutely aware of everything: the soft pad of Maya's bare feet on the hardwood floor, the scent of Alara's own mint toothpaste on Maya's breath, the way the borrowed gray t-shirt hung loosely on Maya's frame. Now, they were in her bed. Alara lay stiffly on her side, facing away from the middle of the bed, giving Maya as much space as possible. The mattress dipped behind her, a warm, heavy presence that seemed to warp the very fabric of reality. She could feel the heat radiating from Maya's body, a tangible force that reached across the few inches of empty space between them. She held her breath, listening. She could hear the soft, shaky rhythm of Maya's breathing, the occasional sniffle that was the lingering echo of her earlier tears. Alara's own heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She was terrified to move, to even breathe too loudly, for fear of shattering the fragile truce of the moment. This was a dream and a nightmare, woven together so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. To have Maya this close was everything she had ever wanted. To have her this close because her heart was broken by someone else was a unique and bitter kind of hell. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The silence in the room was a living thing, expanding and contracting with each breath. Alara's muscles ached with the effort of staying so still. She stared at the faint patterns the streetlights cast on her wall, trying to focus on their shifting shapes, trying to think about anything other than the girl lying beside her. Elle? Maya's voice was a whisper from the darkness, so soft it was almost a thought. It startled Alara, sending a jolt through her rigid body. Yeah, she whispered back, her voice tight. I'm sorry. Is this weird? This is weird, isn't it? I can go to the couch. No, Alara said, too quickly, too forcefully. She softened her tone. No, it's not weird. It's fine. Don't go. The thought of Maya leaving, of this fragile proximity being broken, was suddenly unbearable. There was another long pause. Then, she felt a slight shift in the mattress. Can you face me? Maya asked, her voice small and vulnerable. I don't want to stare at your back. It makes me feel even more alone. Alara's heart stopped. And then it started again, a painful, stuttering beat. Slowly, deliberately, she rolled over. In the dim light filtering through the blinds, she could just make out Maya's form, a pale shape against the dark blue of the duvet. Her eyes had adjusted enough to see the glint of tears on Maya's cheeks. Her face was a portrait of misery, and Alara's carefully constructed defenses crumbled to dust. She reached out, her hand moving of its own accord, and gently brushed a tear from Maya's cheek with her thumb. The skin was soft, damp, and impossibly warm. The contact was electric, a searing brand on her fingertips. It was the most intimate touch they had ever shared, and it felt both profoundly right and dangerously forbidden. Maya leaned into her touch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, her eyes fluttering shut. A soft, shuddering breath escaped her lips. Alara didn't pull her hand away. She left it there, her thumb resting on the curve of Maya's cheekbone, her fingers splayed lightly against her temple. It was an anchor in the storm, for both of them. The line had not just been crossed, it had been erased. The old map was useless now. They were in uncharted territory, and Alara was navigating by the faint, flickering light of a hope she had tried so hard to extinguish. The days that followed were strange and disorienting. The night Maya slept in her bed had changed the atmosphere of the apartment, charging it with a low-level hum of unspoken things. Maya didn't mention it the next morning, and neither did Alara, but it lingered between them, a shared secret. The breakup with Liam was a raw, open thing, and Alara found herself stepping into the role of primary support, a role that was both natural and fraught with new complexities. The physical barriers between them seemed to be systematically dissolving. It started small. Maya, while talking animatedly about a book she was reading, would reach out and place her hand on Alara's forearm to emphasize a point, and then leave it there long after the point was made. Alara would feel the warmth of that hand seep through her sleeve, branding her skin, and she would have to fight to keep her breathing even. Then came the hugs. Their hugs had always been warm and friendly, but now they lasted longer. Maya would cling to her for a few extra seconds when Alara got home from an errand, burying her face in Alara's shoulder with a weary sigh. Alara would hold her, her own arms wrapped around Maya's back, feeling the delicate shape of her shoulder blades, the soft fabric of her sweater, and it felt like holding the entire world. Each hug was a miniature lifetime, a brief, stolen moment of the intimacy she craved. The epicenter of this new world was the couch. They spent nearly every evening there, a silent agreement to not leave the other alone. Sometimes they watched movies, their shoulders and knees pressed together, the contact no longer accidental but intentional, a source of mutual comfort. Alara became hyper-aware of these points of connection, feeling them as buzzing centers of energy. She could map the entire length of Maya's thigh against hers, feel the subtle shifts in her weight, the rhythm of her breathing. It was both maddening and wonderful. One evening, about a week after the breakup, they were sitting in their usual spots, a bowl of popcorn between them, a terrible romantic comedy playing on the screen. Maya had been quiet, her gaze distant. "He never wanted to just do this," Maya said suddenly, her voice soft. Alara muted the TV. "Do what?" "This," Maya repeated, gesturing to the space between them. "Just sit. Just be quiet together." It always had to be an activity. Dinner, a movie out, seeing his friends. He said sitting around was boring. Wasting time, she looked at Alara, her expression earnest and confused. "This doesn't feel like a waste of time to me. It feels necessary." "It's not a waste of time," Alara agreed, her throat tight. "It's called connection." Maya nodded slowly, absorbing the word. "Connection," she repeated, as if tasting it for the first time. "He used to hold my hand in public, you know. But it was always a performance. A possessive thing. Like he was staking a claim." She looked down at her own hands, turning them over in her lap. "He never just held it. Not like he meant it. Not gently." Alara's heart began to beat a little faster. She knew where this was going, or at least, she feared she did. She watched as Maya's gaze lifted from her own hands and settled on Alara's, which were resting on the cushion between them. "What's so great about it, anyway?" Maya asked, a genuine curiosity in her voice. "Hand-holding. Why do girls like it so much? Is it just a romance novel thing?" Alara swallowed hard. I don't think so. It's about feeling linked to someone. A quiet promise. You're not alone, I'm right here." Maya was staring at her now, her honey-colored eyes wide and searching. The air grew thick again, charged with that now familiar, terrifying electricity. The romantic comedy on the screen was forgotten. The world had narrowed to this couch, to this single, loaded question that hung between them. "Can you show me?" Maya whispered. Her voice was barely audible, a fragile thread of sound. What it's supposed to feel like. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity. It wasn't a proposition, not really. It was a clinical request, an inquiry born of a broken heart and a deep, soul-shaking confusion. But to Alara, it felt like a dare. It felt like being asked to walk a tightrope over a canyon. One wrong move, one misinterpretation, and everything would be lost. She could say no. She could laugh it off, dismiss it as a silly question. That would be the safe thing to do. The smart thing. But then she looked at Maya's face, at the raw vulnerability there, at the desperate need to understand what tenderness felt like. And her own safety ceased to matter. Slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, Alara lifted her hand. She turned it palm up, a silent offering on the gray cushion between them. She didn't move closer. She didn't speak. She just waited, her entire being focused on that single, terrifying, hopeful gesture. Maya watched her hand for a long moment, as if it were a strange and foreign object. Then, with a hesitation that spoke volumes, she reached out and placed her own hand in Alara's. Her fingers were cold. Alara's were burning hot. The contrast was a shock, a sudden, sharp intake of breath for both of them. For a second, their hands just rested there, palm to palm, a study in contrasts. Then, gently, tentatively, Alara curled her fingers, wrapping them around Maya's. Her thumb came to rest on the back of Maya's hand, stroking the soft skin there in a slow, soothing rhythm. She didn't interlace their fingers. That felt too intimate, too much like a confession. This was simpler. It was just holding. It was just a quiet promise in the language of touch. A soft, shuddering sigh escaped Maya's lips. Her eyes fluttered shut, and her whole body seemed to relax, melting into the cushions. Her fingers, which had been stiff with uncertainty, softened in Alara's grasp. "Oh," Maya breathed out, the word a tiny puff of air. "That's different." "Different how?" Alara managed to ask, her own voice husky. "It's quiet," Maya said, her eyes still closed. "And it's warm. It feels safe." They sat like that for a long time, their hands joined between them, the movie on the screen playing out its predictable happy ending to an audience of two people who were lost in their own silent, complicated drama. Alara focused on the feeling of Maya's hand in hers. She memorized the shape of her knuckles, the smoothness of her skin, the faint, delicate pulse she could feel at her wrist. It was the most profound connection she had ever felt, a silent conversation that said more than words ever could. She expected Maya to pull away after a minute or two, the experiment concluded. But she didn't. The credits of the movie rolled, the screen went dark, and still, she didn't let go. Her grip remained soft but firm, an anchor in the quiet darkness of the living room. And then she didn't let go. It became their new language. The hand-holding started on the couch, but it didn't stay there. A few days later, they were walking to the grocery store, the autumn air crisp and cool around them. They walked side by side, their arms brushing occasionally. Alara was acutely aware of the small space between their hands, a space that felt charged with potential. Then, as they waited to cross a busy street, Maya simply reached out and took her hand. It was a simple, fluid motion, as natural as breathing. She laced their fingers together this time, her palm pressing firmly against Alara's. Alara's breath caught in her throat. Her gaze shot to their joined hands, then to Maya's face. Maya was looking straight ahead at the flashing "Don't Walk" sign, a faint, almost imperceptible blush on her cheeks. She didn't say anything. She just held on. The light changed. They crossed the street, their hands swinging gently between them. It felt shockingly, terrifyingly normal. It felt like a public declaration of something Alara couldn't even name. Her heart was a chaotic symphony in her chest. Was this just an extension of the comfort Maya was seeking? A new habit born from a moment of vulnerability on the couch? Or was it more? She didn't dare to ask. She didn't dare to break the spell. So she just held on, her fingers intertwined with Maya's, and walked. The late-night conversations deepened, spiraling into more dangerous territory. They talked about past relationships, not just Liam, but all of them. Maya confessed that she had always felt like she was playing a part, trying to be the girlfriend she saw in movies. "I was always performing," she admitted one night, her voice low. They were on the couch again, their hands clasped together over the popcorn bowl. The cool girlfriend, the supportive girlfriend, the sexy girlfriend. "I had all these different costumes, but I never felt like I was just me." "Does that make any sense?" "Perfect sense," Alara said softly. "It's called compulsory heterosexuality." She said the words before she could stop herself, a piece of her own hidden world slipping out. Maya turned to her, her brow furrowed. "What's that?" Alara's heart hammered. She had gone too far. It's a theory that our culture pushes women so strongly towards being with men that we don't even stop to consider if it's what we genuinely, authentically want. We just assume it is, because it's the default setting." Maya was silent for a long time, her thumb tracing patterns on the back of Alara's hand. The gesture was absent-minded, subconscious, and it sent shivers up Alara's arm. "The default setting," Maya repeated slowly. "It's like I've been following a script that someone else wrote for me my whole life." "Maybe," Alara said, her voice careful. "And I never once thought to ask if I could write my own lines," Maya finished, her voice filled with a dawning sense of wonder and confusion. She looked at Alara, her gaze intense, probing. "You've thought about this a lot, haven't you?" It was a direct hit. A question that saw too much. I've done some reading," Alara stammered, feeling exposed. But Maya didn't push. She just squeezed her hand and turned her attention back to the TV, though Alara could tell she wasn't watching it. She was staring into the middle distance, her mind clearly spinning, reprocessing years of her own life through this new, startling lens. Alara started noticing other things too. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in Maya's behavior. When Alara was talking, she would find Maya's gaze fixed not on her eyes, but on her mouth. It would only be for a second or two, a fleeting downward glance, but it happened again and again. Each time, a jolt of pure, unadulterated hope would shoot through Alara, so powerful it almost hurt. She would quickly crush it, telling herself she was imagining things, projecting her own desires onto her grieving friend. It was cruel to let herself hope. Hope was the surest path to heartbreak. One Saturday afternoon, Alara was standing at the kitchen counter, trying to untangle a stubborn knot in her necklace. She was getting frustrated, her fingers fumbling with the delicate chain. "Here, let me," Maya's voice said from behind her. Alara startled. She hadn't heard her come in. Maya stepped closer, her body pressing lightly against Alara's back as she reached around to work on the clasp. Alara froze, every nerve in her body screaming. Maya's hair brushed against her cheek, smelling of lavender. Her fingers, deft and gentle, worked at the knot just below Alara's ear. Alara could feel the warmth of Maya's breath on her neck. The world seemed to stop. Alara closed her eyes, her own hands gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming, a sensory overload that left her dizzy. It was too much. It was not enough. "There," Maya murmured, her voice a low vibration that seemed to travel straight through Alara's spine. The necklace came free. But Maya didn't step away. She lingered there for a beat too long, her hands still resting on Alara's collarbones, her face still close to Alara's neck. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Maya could feel it. "What is happening? What is this?" Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. Maya stepped back, clearing her throat. "All fixed," she said, her voice a little shaky. Alara turned around slowly. Maya's face was flushed, and she wouldn't meet Alara's eyes. She was fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater, a nervous energy radiating from her. "Thanks," Alara managed to say, her own voice barely a whisper. The unspoken thing between them was no longer a quiet hum. It was a roar. It was a physical presence in the room, taking up all the air, making it hard to breathe. The careful balance they had maintained was tipping, the ground beneath their feet shifting and cracking. Something was about to break. Alara didn't know if it would be the tension, or if it would be her heart. The breaking point arrived, as these things often do, not with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet, unavoidable question. The hope that Alara had been so ruthlessly suppressing had become a tangible thing, a constant companion that whispered possibilities in her ear. It made her reckless. It made her clumsy. And it made her terrified. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. Before, she had only her own secret heart to worry about. Now, there was this fragile, undefined new reality with Maya, a reality where they held hands and stood too close and shared charged silences. To misinterpret it would be a catastrophe of epic proportions. The fear began to outweigh the hope. The terror of being wrong, of being nothing more than a temporary comfort, a convenient placeholder for affection while Maya healed, started to consume her. So she did the only thing she could think of to protect herself. She pulled back. It was subtle at first. She would untangle their hands after a few minutes, claiming her own was getting sweaty. She would choose the armchair instead of the couch for their movie nights, creating a chasm of empty space between them. When Maya came to stand behind her in the kitchen, Alara would find a reason to move to the other side of the room. She stopped instigating the late-night talks, pleading exhaustion, and heading to bed early, where she would lie awake for hours, her heart aching with the self-inflicted distance. She was trying to rebuild her walls, brick by painful brick. She was trying to put the glass back up around the priceless artifact of her friendship before she did something stupid, like reaching out and trying to touch it. It took Maya 4 days to corner her. Alara was washing dishes, her back to the room, when Maya's voice came from the doorway, quiet but firm. "We need to talk." Alara's hands froze in the soapy water. She didn't turn around. "About what?" she asked, trying to sound casual, unconcerned. "Don't do that," Maya said, and the lack of her usual warmth sent a chill down Alara's spine. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. You've been hiding from me for days, Alara. You've been avoiding me in our own apartment. And I want to know why." Alara closed her eyes, her shoulders slumping in defeat. The water from the faucet drummed against a plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence. She couldn't do this. She couldn't have this conversation. "I haven't been avoiding you," she lied, the word tasting sour. "I've just been busy. Tired." She heard Maya take a step into the room. "No, that's not it." Something changed. 1 minute, everything it was good. And the next, you built a fortress around yourself. Did I do something wrong? Her voice cracked on the last words, a note of genuine hurt that lanced straight through Alara's carefully constructed defenses. "You did everything right," Alara's heart cried. "That's the problem." Slowly, she turned off the water. She dried her hands on a towel, her movements deliberate, stalling for time. She had to find the right words, the right lie to smooth this over, to get them back to a place that felt safe, even if it was lonely. But when she finally turned around to face Maya, the words died in her throat. Maya was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed over her chest, not in anger, but in a kind of desperate self-protection. Her face was a mixture of confusion, hurt, and something else Alara couldn't quite decipher. Something that looked dangerously like fear. "Just talk to me, Maya pleaded, her voice soft again. "Please. Whatever it is, we can handle it. We always do. What aren't you telling me?" The direct question was a key turning in a lock Alara had kept bolted for years. All the unspoken words, all the suppressed feelings, all the desperate, secret love rushed up inside her, a tidal wave against a crumbling dam. She felt a tremor run through her body. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "Maya, I can't." "Why not?" Maya pressed, taking another step closer. They were so close now. Close enough for Alara to see the frantic pulse beating in the hollow of Maya's throat. "I don't understand. I thought we were getting closer. I thought holding your hand meant something. I thought," she trailed off, her gaze dropping to the floor. "What did you think, Maya?" Alara asked, her voice tight with a pain so sharp it was almost physical. "What did you think it meant?" Maya looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't know, she said, her voice rising with frustration. That's the problem. I don't know what anything means anymore. My whole life has been turned upside down. The only thing that felt real, the only thing that felt right and true in all of this mess, was you. Was holding your hand. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and the confession that followed changed everything. I think I broke up with Liam for a lot of reasons, Maya said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, each word carefully, painfully chosen. But I think the biggest reason is you. Because when I was with him, even in our best moments, there was this little voice in my head saying that it wasn't right. That it should feel different. It should feel like it feels when I'm with you. The dam inside Alara broke. The wave crashed over her, and she couldn't hold it back any longer. Tears she hadn't even realized were there began to stream down her face. Maya's eyes widened in alarm. Alara? What is it? You don't get to say that, Alara choked out, the words ripped from her soul. You don't get to say that to me unless you mean it. But I do mean it, Maya insisted, her own tears starting to fall. I know I'm a mess, and I'm confused, and I probably have no right to feel any of this right now. But it's the only thing I'm sure of. When I'm with you, I feel like I can finally breathe. And I've been thinking about things I've never let myself think about before. Like what? Alara whispered, her entire body trembling. Maya took the final step, closing the space between them. She reached up, her hands incredibly gentle, and wiped the tears from Alara's cheeks with her thumbs, her touch a searing, unbearable comfort. Like how your eyes crinkle at the corners when you really smile, Maya whispered, her gaze tracing Alara's features. And how you bite your lip when you're concentrating. And how your hand feels so right in mine, her gaze dropped, just for a second, to Alara's mouth. When her eyes met Alara's again, they were dark with a terrifying, beautiful new emotion. And for the past week, Maya confessed, her voice shaking, I've been thinking, almost constantly, about what it would be like to kiss you. The world stopped. It simply ceased to turn. There was no kitchen, no apartment, no city outside the window. There was only Maya's face, inches from hers, and the impossible, miraculous words she had just spoken. The air crackled, thick with ozone, like the moment before a lightning strike. Alara felt the charge in every cell of her body, a feeling so intense it was almost painful. This was it. The point of no return. The culmination of 2 years of silent, aching love, of whispered hopes in the dark, of 1,000 tiny, stolen moments. Maya, Alara breathed, the name a prayer, a question, a surrender. The confession hung in the air between them, a fragile, shimmering bridge built from the wreckage of Maya's old life and the foundation of their shared history. It was terrifying and beautiful, and Alara felt an overwhelming urge to both run from it and race across it. The hope she had tried so hard to kill was resurrected, fierce and blindingly bright. It hurt to look at. Say something, Maya whispered, her thumbs still stroking Alara's tear-streaked cheeks. Her own face was a canvas of fear and desperate sincerity. Please, Alara. Say anything. Alara opened her mouth, but for a moment, no sound came out. Her mind was a maelstrom of shock and disbelief and a joy so profound it felt like grief. All the carefully rehearsed speeches she'd imagined for this impossible scenario vanished. All the witty retorts, the gentle rejections, the cautious acknowledgments, they were all gone, burned away by the raw honesty in Maya's eyes. So she gave her the only thing she had left, the truth. The whole, terrifying, liberating truth. 2 years, Alara said, her voice cracking, thick with unshed emotion. 3 months. Anne. I don't know, 20-something days. Maya's brow furrowed in confusion. What? What are you talking about? That's how long, Alara explained, a watery, hysterical laugh bubbling up in her chest. That's how long I've been thinking about kissing you, Maya. That's how long I've been completely, hopelessly in love with you. The confession, spoken aloud for the first time, felt like a physical weight lifting from her soul. It was like setting down a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying until it was gone. Maya's expression shifted from confusion to stunned, dawning comprehension. Her hands stilled on Alara's face. Her mouth opened slightly, a small O of perfect surprise. She stared at Alara as if seeing her for the very first time. 2 years, she breathed, the words full of wonder. Alara, why didn't you say anything? Because of him, Alara said simply, the name Liam, a ghost in the room. Because of this, she gestured between them. Our friendship. It was everything to me. I couldn't risk losing it. I couldn't risk losing you. You could never lose me, Maya said, her voice fierce with a sudden, absolute certainty. Don't you know that by now? You're my person, Elle. You always have been. I was just too blind, too caught up in the script to see it. And then, the entire dynamic of the universe shifted. The tectonic plates of their relationship, which had been grinding against each other for weeks, finally slid into a new alignment. The tension that had been building and building didn't just snap, it transformed. It became something else entirely. Something soft and luminous and full of terrifying promise. Maya's gaze dropped to Alara's lips again, but this time it wasn't fleeting. It lingered. It was a question, an intention, a declaration. Alara's breath hitched in her throat. Her heart, which had been pounding a frantic, panicked rhythm, slowed to a deep, heavy thud. Can I? Maya whispered, her voice husky, her eyes lifting to meet Alara's one last time, asking for permission, for confirmation that this new world was real. Can I kiss you? Alara couldn't find her voice. She could only nod, a small, jerky movement that conveyed all of her terror and all of her yearning in one simple gesture. That was all the confirmation Maya needed. She leaned in, closing the final, infinitesimal gap between them. The first touch was impossibly soft, a tentative, feather-light brush of her lips against Alara's. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. It was a question asked in the language of touch. It was hesitant, shy, and full of a reverence that made Alara's knees feel weak. Alara responded with a soft sigh, her eyes fluttering shut. She leaned into the touch, a silent answer. Yes. Oh God, yes. That was all the encouragement Maya needed. The pressure of her mouth deepened, and the tentative question became a definitive statement. Maya's lips were soft and warm and tasted faintly of the tea she'd been drinking and something else, something that was just Maya. It was a taste Alara had only ever dreamed of, and the reality of it was so much more potent, so much more overwhelming than her imagination could have ever conceived. A soft sound, a whimper of pure, unadulterated relief, escaped Alara's throat. She brought her own hands up, her fingers tangling in the soft fabric of Maya's sweater, pulling her closer, trying to erase any space that remained between them. Maya's hands slid from Alara's face, one moving to cup the back of her neck, her fingers threading into Alara's hair, while the other wrapped around her waist, holding her steady. The kiss deepened further, becoming more certain, more urgent. It was the culmination of 2 years of stolen glances, of lingering touches, of words left unsaid. It was a conversation 100 pages long, spoken in a single, breathless moment. There was all of Maya's confusion and dawning realization, and all of Alara's pent-up longing and agonizing patience. It was a story of friendship and love, of fear and bravery, of finding a home in the most unexpected and wonderful of places. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their chests rising and falling in unison. Maya didn't move away. She rested her forehead against Alara's, their noses brushing. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms in the middle of their kitchen, the world having fundamentally and irrevocably changed around them. Wow, Maya breathed out, the word a soft puff of air against Alara's lips. Yeah, Alara whispered back, her voice shaky. That felt, Maya started, trailing off as she searched for the word. Right, Alara finished for her, the single word encompassing everything. It wasn't just good. It wasn't just passionate. It was right. It felt like a piece of her soul that had been missing had just clicked into place. Maya pulled back just enough to look at her, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across her face. It was the first genuine, unclouded smile Alara had seen on her in months, and it was like watching the sun rise after a long, dark night. Right, Maya agreed, her voice full of awe. It felt like coming home. The aftermath of the kiss was a strange, shimmering bubble of reality. They stood in the kitchen for a long time, not speaking, just holding each other, their foreheads pressed together, their breathing slowly returning to normal. The air itself felt different, softer. The harsh angles of the room seemed to have blurred, and everything was cast in a warm, golden light that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun slanting through the window. It was as if the world had sighed in relief along with them. But beneath the wonder, a new feeling began to creep in for Alara. A cold tendril of fear. The bubble was perfect, but bubbles were fragile. They popped. Maya? Alara whispered against her skin, her eyes still closed. Maya murmured, her voice a contented hum. I'm terrified. The admission was quiet, but it landed with the weight of a stone in the silent kitchen. Maya pulled back, her smile faltering, her expression immediately serious. She searched Alara's face, her brow creased with concern. Me too, she confessed without hesitation. I'm utterly, completely terrified. The shared fear, spoken aloud, did not double the anxiety. Instead, miraculously, it seemed to have it. It became a new bond between them, another truth they could share. What does this mean? Alara asked, the question that had been circling in her head since Maya's lips had first touched hers. What are we? What happens now? Maya took a deep breath, her hands tightening their grip on Alara's waist, as if to anchor both of them. I don't know, she said, and the honesty was more reassuring than any easy promise would have been. I have no idea. My life it's a mess. I just blew up a 2-year relationship. I'm just now realizing that I might not be who I thought I was. I don't have a map for this, Elle. She looked down at their feet, then back up, her gaze clear and unwavering. But I know one thing. I don't want to go back. I don't want to unkiss you. I don't want to stop holding your hand. I want more of this. Whatever this is, she gestured between them. I want to figure it out. With you. Relief washed over Alara, so potent it made her feel lightheaded. Okay, she said, the word coming out on a shaky breath. Okay, we can figure it out. Together. A comfortable silence fell between them again, but this time it was filled with a sense of purpose, of a shared future. They had made a decision. They were a we. Then a look of sudden, profound realization crossed Maya's face. It was as if 1,000 puzzle pieces had just clicked into place in her mind. Oh my God, she whispered, her eyes wide. What? Alara asked, her heart giving a nervous flutter. It was always you, Maya said, her voice filled with a stunned awe. All those times I complained about Liam. All those things I said were missing. It wasn't that he was a bad guy, or that he didn't care. It was that he wasn't you. The validation was so complete, so absolute, that Alara felt tears spring to her eyes again. This was the healing balm on 2 years of silent wounds. This was the acknowledgement of every painful night she had sat and listened, her own heart breaking while she tried to mend Maya's. I was measuring him against you, Maya continued, her words tumbling out now as the realization deepened. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you, and they all came up short. The ease, the way you listen, the way you see me. I called it friendship because I didn't have any other word for it. I didn't know I was allowed to want that from a partner. You're allowed to want anything you want, Alara said softly, her thumb stroking the curve of Maya's hip. I want you, Maya said, the words simple, direct, and utterly devastating in their power. It turns out, all this time, I just wanted you. They migrated from the kitchen to the couch, their hands clasped together, refusing to break the connection. They sat side by side, their bodies angled towards each other, and they talked for hours as the afternoon faded into evening. They recontextualized their entire friendship, looking back at old memories through this new lens. The time Maya had gotten jealous when Alara had gone on a date, the way they always gravitated towards each other in a crowded room, the casual, constant physical affection that had always seemed to stop just short of something more. It had all been there, hiding in plain sight. They made a pact. To take it slow. To be honest about their fears. To communicate, even when it was hard. They would navigate the fallout from Maya's breakup with Liam, and they would figure out what being a we looked like, one day at a time. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface of their newfound joy, but for the first time, the hope was louder. 3 months later, the world was a different color. The gray, muted tones of Alara's previous existence had been replaced by a vibrant, saturated palette. The ache in her chest, the tenant that had lived there for so long, had packed its bags and moved out, and the space it left behind was filled with a quiet, steady warmth that started in her core and radiated out to her fingertips. It was a Sunday morning. Sunlight streamed into the apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden sprites. The scent of coffee and cinnamon filled the kitchen. Alara stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, while Maya stood behind her, her arms wrapped around Alara's waist, her chin resting on her shoulder. This was their new normal. A comfortable, easy domesticity that had settled over them as naturally as snow falling on a quiet landscape. The initial terror and uncertainty had given way to a deep, abiding sense of rightness. They had fallen into a rhythm, a dance of shared lives that was both thrillingly new and comfortingly familiar. "They smell amazing," Maya murmured into her shoulder, her voice thick with sleep. She placed a soft kiss on Alara's neck, a casual gesture of affection that still sent a shiver of delight through Alara every single time. "They're my masterpiece," Alara declared grandly, expertly flipping a pancake. The culmination of years of Sunday morning practice. "All that practice, and you never had anyone to share them with," Maya teased gently. "I was waiting for the right pancake co-conspirator," Alara said, leaning her head back to rest against Maya's. The conversation with Liam had been hard, but necessary. Maya had handled it with a grace and honesty that had made Alara's heart swell with pride. There had been hurt and confusion, but ultimately, a clean break. The obstacle was gone, leaving only open road ahead of them. They had navigated the small, significant milestones. The first time they called each other girlfriend. The first time Maya introduced Alara as such to a friend. Each step had been taken with a mixture of trepidation and joy, their hands held tightly the entire time. Alara slid the last pancake onto a plate and turned in Maya's arms to face her. Maya's hair was a mess from sleep, and she was wearing one of Alara's old, ridiculously soft band t-shirts. She had never looked more beautiful. "You have a little flower on your nose," Maya said, her smile soft. She reached up and gently brushed it away with her thumb. Her touch was no longer charged with the frantic, desperate electricity of those first few weeks. It was now a calm, steady current that powered Alara's entire world. "It's my secret ingredient," Alara whispered, leaning in to capture Maya's lips in a slow, sweet kiss that tasted of coffee and maple syrup and home. They ate their pancakes at the small kitchen table, their knees brushing underneath. The easy silence was filled with a comfortable companionship that was more intimate than any conversation. Everything Alara had ever yearned for, every fantasy she had played out in the lonely quiet of her own mind, was here. It was real. It was better. Later, they were curled up on the couch, the place where so much of their story had unfolded. Alara was reading, her head resting in Maya's lap, and Maya was running her fingers through Alara's hair, a soothing, repetitive motion. The afternoon was quiet, peaceful, perfect. "Hey, Elle," Maya said softly. Alara answered, not looking up from her book. "Do you ever think about how crazy it is? How we were right here the whole time and we just didn't see it." Alara closed her book, marking her page, and twisted to look up at Maya. She thought about the 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days of quiet longing. She thought about the pain, the fear, the hopelessness. And then she thought about the joy, the relief, the profound, earth-shattering rightness of this moment. Sometimes, she admitted. "But I also think, maybe we had to not see it. Maybe we needed that time. You needed to figure out what you didn't want, and I needed to learn how to be patient. Maybe the story had to be written exactly that way for us to get to this page." Maya smiled, her fingers gently tracing the line of Alara's jaw. "You and your beautiful, poetic soul." She leaned down and kissed her again, a soft, lingering kiss full of unspoken gratitude. "I'm just glad we finally got to this page." "Me too," Alara whispered. "Me too." She settled back into Maya's lap, picking up her book again, but she didn't read. She just listened to the sound of Maya's steady breathing, felt the rhythmic stroke of her fingers in her hair, and let the warmth of the afternoon sun and the warmth of her love wash over her. She understood now that some of the greatest journeys are not about traveling to distant lands, but about having the courage to cross the small, terrifying space between yourself and another person. She had spent years living as a ghost in her own life, and now, finally, she felt completely, wonderfully, incandescently real. This love hadn't just given her Maya, it had given her back to herself. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she would never, ever let go.